Hey guys. Tonight, we're stepping into the chill of a forgotten world, a place where winter wasn't just a season. It was a test of survival. So pull your blanket a little tighter, and let's wander through the frostbitten paths of the Middle Ages. The air bites at your face the moment you step outside your thatched cottage. It's not the kind of cold you're used to, it's heavier, hungrier, the kind that seeps through every layer of wool and settles into your bones. The world is hushed, blanketed in snow that glows faintly under a pale gray sky. You can see your breath hanging like smoke as you trudge toward the frozen stream with a wooden pail, hoping it hasn't solidified overnight. This is winter in a medieval village, no central heating, no instant coffee, no warm showers waiting for you. The fire inside your home barely burns because the woodpile is already dwindling. Every log is precious, each spark a tiny rebellion against the cold. You think back to the summer, when everyone warned that lazy hands in harvest meant hungry mouths in winter. You'd laugh then. Now, with frost on your eyelashes and your stomach aching, the joke doesn't feel funny anymore. Inside your cottage, the air is thick with smoke from the open hearth. The small window is shuttered with oiled parchment to keep the wind out. But it only half works. The walls made of wattle and daub leak drafts like a sieve. The straw mattress you sleep on smells faintly of damp earth. You share it with your family, all huddled together under a rough woolen blanket, because body heat is the only real insulation you have. And food well, let's just say dinner isn't something to look forward to. Salted pork, if you're lucky, thin strips left over from the autumn slaughter. More often, it's a stew that's mostly water, with a few limp vegetables and a handful of barley. Bread, hard as stone, unless you warm it by the fire first. Scholars still argue whether the so-called peasant diet kept people alive or slowly starved them. But one thing's certain, no one ate for pleasure. But odd detail. You might chew on bark or an all-boiled leather if times got bad. People did that really. Desperation makes strange meals. The villagers whisper stories of past winters when entire families vanished, not from plague or war, but from hunger and frost. And yet, somehow, you still drag yourself out of bed at dawn, tend to the goats, check on the thatch, fetch icy water, because in this world, stopping means dying. So as the wind howls outside your tiny window, and the snow keeps falling, you press closer to the fading warmth of the fire. It crackles softly, a fragile heartbeat in the frozen ark. Somewhere, a rooster coughs in protest too cold even to crow. You close your eyes for a moment and think maybe spring will come soon. But deep down, you know that's still a long, long way off. Morning comes slowly in the medieval winter, if it can even be called morning. The sun is more of a dim gray disk than a light, hiding somewhere behind layers of cloud. You wake to the sound of your own breath. The air is so cold that it stings your lungs. The fire has long since died out, leaving only black and wood and faint curls of ash. Your fingers are numb before you even get out of bed. You push aside the rough woolen blanket and feel the rush of cold air hit your face. The floor hard-packed dirt feels like ice under your bare feet. Your first task is to get the fire going again. Without it, there's no heat, no light, no way to cook. You strike flint against steel, the tiny sparks landing uselessly until one finally catches on the straw. You blow gently, coaxing the flame to life. That little flicker feels like victory. Outside, the village is barely awake. The sound of a cart creaks in the distance, wheels grinding against frozen mud. Smoke begins to rise from a few chimneys, thin trails that disappear into the white morning haze. You pull your cloak tight, its wool, rough and scratchy, dyed a faded indigo that's seen better days. The edges are stiff with frost. You step outside to fetch more wood from the pile, each log heavier than you remember. Every movement feels slower in this cold, like the air itself is resisting you. You glance toward your neighbor's cottage. His door is half open, and you see him struggling to break the ice in a water barrel. His breath clouds the air like steam from a dying forge. He nods at you silently. Words feel unnecessary when the cold steals your voice. By mid-morning, you try to work. Maybe patch the roof or mend a broken tool, but your fingers ache too much to hold the hammer for long. The iron feels colder than stone. Even the animals seem to have given up. The chickens stay huddled in their coop, and the cow stares blankly into space, breath rising in little clouds. Then comes the hunger again, that's low. Grinding ache in your stomach. You eat a small piece of bread and drink some ale that's gone flat. It's not much, but it's better than water, which is likely frozen. And there's a strange comfort in routine even if it's harsh. Repetitive, unrelenting. It keeps your mind from wandering into darker thoughts. Somewhere, a child coughs a deep, wet cough that echoes through the still air. Illness spreads easily in winter. With everyone crammed into smoky, unventilated huts, it's only a matter of time. You remember last year's fever, the one that took 3 families. The priest said it was God's will. You're not so sure. Scholars still argue whether medieval winters were harsher because of the Little Ice Age, a real climatic shift that made crops fail and rivers freeze. Whatever the cause, it feels personal, as if the season itself is testing you. By evening, the sky darkens again. Painted in gray and purple, you sit by the fire. Your face warm, but your back still cold. The room smells of smoke and cabbage. You stare into the flames, listening to the wind whisper through the cracks in the walls. There's no sound of laughter. No music, no chatter, just survival, quiet and steady. And as you close your eyes, you realize in this world, night isn't for rest. It's just another part of endurance. You wake up before dawn. The air bites your face, cold enough to make your eyelashes stiff with frost. Inside your small timber house, the fire has long since died. You can see your breath fogging up in faint white clouds as you pull the ruffle blanket tighter around yourself. There's no luxury of staying in bed if you wait too long. The water in the bucket will freeze solid. And that means no washing, no breakfast, and no chance to warm your hands. You move quietly so as not to wake the others. Families here live in a single room, once smoky. Cramped space shared with parents, siblings, maybe even a pig or two for warmth. The smell of hay, smoke, and animal musk fills your lungs. Thick and unrelenting. You get used to it. Or maybe you just stop noticing after a while. Outside, the village still sleeps. The roofs are blanketed in snow that glitters faintly in the moonlight. The only sound is the creaking of trees and the distant bark of a hungry dog. You trudge through the half-frozen mud toward the well. Your boots, if you're lucky enough to have them, are stiff with ice. Most villagers wrap their feet in straw instead, changing it daily like a disposable sock. Scholars still argue whether that actually kept people warmer or just delayed the frostbite. At the well, your hands burn as you pull the rope. The wood is cold and slick. The first bucket you haul up has a thin layer of ice over it, which you break with your fist. The water is so cold it feels alive, biting your skin, crawling into your bones. You fill a clay pot and hurry back before your fingers stop responding. Inside, the hearth waits to be reignited. You use a bit of dried moss and blow gently. It takes patience, a steady rhythm. Finally, smoke curls up again, sharp and gray, filling your throat. But you welcome it. The small flame grows, and warmth begins to creep through the room. You can almost hear your joints sigh in relief. Breakfast is humble. A bit of barley porridge, maybe some stale bread if you're lucky. You sip from a wooden cup of weak ale, safer than water, because water heats off and carries disease. It tastes sour, but it's life. You eat in silence, listening to the faint cracking of the fire and the groan of the wind outside. You think about the day ahead, mending fences, chopping wood, clearing paths, Work never stops, not even in the harshest months. Survival depends on motion. To sit still is to freeze. As you step outside, snowflakes begin to fall again, soft, relentless and indifferent. The world feels both silent and infinite. And for a moment, as your breath mingles with the falling snow, you realize this winter isn't trying to kill you on purpose. It just doesn't care if you live. By midday, the sun rises weakly, not the bright, warm sun you're used to, but a pale disk hiding behind thin, icy clouds. It offers no comfort, only the illusion of light. You've been working since morning. Your fingers numb even inside your wool mittens. The axe you're holding feels heavier with every swing as you chop through another log, each strike echoing across the still village. Wood is gold in winter. Without enough of it, you'd freeze before spring. So, every villager becomes part-time lumberjack, trudging into the forest to cut trees, haul branches, and stack them high beside their homes. You wipe the sweat from your forehead, only to find it frozen into tiny crystals on your glove. That's winter's cruel joke. It makes you sweat and freeze at the same time. A few children run past you, chasing each other through the snow, their laughter cutting through the quiet. You can't help but smile, though their joy seems fragile here like the sunlight. Brief and precious, one of them slips and falls, laughing harder, her cheeks reading raw. Childhood in this world is short. By the time she's 12, she'll be working beside her mother, grinding grain or spinning wool for hours. Your neighbor, Tomas, trudges by pulling a small sled piled with logs. His beard is crusted with frost, his face rough as bark. He gives you a nod, too tired for words. Everyone here moves like that, slow, deliberate, saving energy for what matters. Conversation is a luxury. There's a faint smell of burning meat in the air. Someone's cooking something rare. You glance toward the smoke rising from a nearby hut, and your stomach growls. Most meals in winter are made of thin gruel, cabbage, or salted fish if you're fortunate. Fresh meat is almost mythical. The villagers share when they can, but scarcity breeds suspicion. There are whispers that sometimes, during the worst winters, when animals die and stores run dry, people go missing. Scholars still argue whether medieval cannibalism was real or exaggerated folklore. But the fear was always real enough to keep people awake at night. As the day wears on, your breath fogs heavier, and your limbs grow sluggish. The world narrows to a rhythm chop. Lift, carry, stack. The sound of steel against wood becomes hypnotic. There's something almost peaceful about it, a reminder that life here depends on simple, physical acts. Then, a sudden gust of wind roars through the forest. You stop and look up. The branches sway and creak, snow tumbling down in soft bursts. A croak somewhere high above, black against the white-gray sky. It feels like a warning. You decide to head back, dragging your own pile of wood behind you. The snow crunches beneath your boots with that satisfying, brittle sound. From a distance, the village looks like a scattering of smoke and rooftops, fragile islands in a sea of white. And as you near your door, your breath heavy and shoulders aching, you realize this day isn't over. The fire still needs tending. The animals still need feeding. And night will come faster than you want it to. By late afternoon, the light begins to fade again, far too early for your liking. The winter sun doesn't so much set as it simply gives up, slipping behind the trees as if tired of watching humanity struggle below. You trudge back inside your hut, stamping snow from your boots. The warmth of the small hearth greets you like an old friend, though even that warmth feels fragile, like it might disappear if you breathe too loudly. Inside, the air is thick with smoke. Chimneys in these homes are barely more than holes in the roof, so the smoke lingers, curling around your head until your eyes sting. Your wife, or perhaps your mother, depending on how you picture yourself, here stirs a pot of thin soup over the fire. The smell of onions, turnips, and barley fills the room. It's not much, but it's hot, and in this world, that means survival. You take a seat on the wooden bench near the fire. The walls of the hut are lined with whatever insulation the family could find: straw, old cloth, sometimes even moss. Rats love it. You hear them skittering behind the walls. Chewing, surviving, just like you. The medieval home was never truly empty. You shared it with insects, vermin, and the constant groan of wood expanding and shrinking with the cold. The room flickers in orange light, and shadows dance across the walls. You watch the fire for a moment, hypnotized by how alive it seems. In a world of frost, that flicker is almost sacred. People in your time might take heating for granted, but here it's worship. Without it, you'd be gone by morning. You take your bowl, the hot liquid burning your palms through the clay. One sip and it's bliss, for a few seconds. You forget the numbness in your toes and the ache in your hands. Your family eats quietly, talking wastes breath. Every sound outside feels magnified: a creak, a gust, the bark of a distant dog. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door. It's faint but deliberate. You glance at your wife. She frowns but gets up anyway. When she opens it, the wind howls in, carrying a spray of snow. Standing there is old Agnes, the village healer, or witch, depending on who you ask. Her face is wrapped in a wool scarf, her hands clutching a bundle of herbs. She steps inside without waiting for permission. Your youngest is coughing again. She mutters, her voice like gravel. The frost is in her chest. You hadn't noticed over the sounds of the storm, but now you hear it, that sharp, raspy wheeze from the corner of the room. Agnes sits beside the child, murmuring words you don't quite catch. She sprinkles something into a cup and pours steaming water from her kettle. The air fills with the sharp scent of thyme and mint. "Breathe this in," she says softly. "It may help or not. God decides the rest." That's how medicine works here: equal parts faith, herbs, and superstition. Scholars still argue whether women, like Agnes, were healers or early scientists misunderstood by their time. But to you right now, she's hope in human form. When she leaves, she presses a small charm into your hand, a carved piece of wood, rough but shaped like a cross. "Hang it above the door," she says, "to keep death from entering." You nod, even though you know that death doesn't need an invitation. It already lives here. Outside, the night howls again, and the door rattles in its hinges. You sit quietly by the fire, listening to the world shrink down to the size of this one glowing room. Morning comes, if you can call it that. The world outside your hut is still more shadow than light. You wake up to the sound of coughing again, and the cold bite of air creeping under the door. The fire has died down to embers. You pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders, though it's little more than a thin piece of wool. In the medieval winter, warmth isn't comfort, it's a negotiation. You rise, your breath fogging in front of your face, and reach for a log to toss into the hearth. The fire crackles reluctantly, like it resents being woken up. A few sparks jump out, and you instinctively pull back, a reminder that this little flame holds both life and danger. Many huts in villages like yours went up in flames during winter. One accident, one fallen spark, and your only protection from the cold would turn to ash in minutes. As the room warms slightly, you hear the church bell tolling in the distance, deep and heavy, echoing through the valley. It's not Sunday, so that means one thing: someone's died. You sit there for a moment, hands clasped, not even sure who it is yet. It could be old Mara from the edge of the village. It could be the miller's son. It could even be someone you saw yesterday. Death here moves quietly, like the snow, sudden, cold, and absolute. You head out to the path leading to the chapel. The villagers are already gathering, their faces half hid and beneath hoods and scarves. The priest stands near the graveyard, murmuring a prayer that gets lost in the wind. The body lies wrapped in cloth, no coffin, just a shroud. There isn't enough wood for that luxury. You stand there, watching as the ground is broken open again. The soil is hard as stone, and 2 men take turns with the spade. One curses under his breath, the other just keeps digging. They'll be doing this again soon, you think. Winter always demands its due. When the body is lowered into the earth, everyone makes the sign of the cross. Some whisper prayers, others stare blankly. It's hard to grieve properly when you're too busy trying to stay alive yourself. You notice a flock of crows circling above black against the white sky. It's eerie, but not unusual. The villagers say they carry the souls of the dead. Scholars, much later, will argue whether such beliefs were religion or coping mechanisms in disguise. You don't need a scholar to tell you that faith is often all people have left. After the burial, a few villagers walk back together, their boots crunching in rhythm on the snow. Conversation drifts to practical matters: who still has grain left, whether the river is frozen solid, when the tax collector might come. Even in mourning, life must go on. Back at your hut, the air feels heavy. You look at your children and think of the fresh grave outside. Survival here isn't just luck, it's endurance. You reach up and touch the wooden char Magnus gave you, hanging above the door. It's warm from the firelight, smooth beneath your fingers. For a moment, it feels like it's working. Outside, snow begins to fall again, slow, steady, endless. You watch through the small hole in the wall that serves as a window. The flakes gather on the ledge, soft and delicate, like tiny white lies covering the truth of how hard this world really is. By evening, the whole village disappears beneath a new layer of snow. Fires glow faintly from the huts, each one a tiny ember of defiance against the vast, cold silence. And as you sit there by your fire, staring into the flickering light, you realize something strange: the quiet, for all its weight, has begun to feel like company. The day passes slowly, like the sun itself is reluctant to move. You step outside to fetch water from the well, your boots scrunching on the thick crust of snow. Each step feels heavier than the last, and the icy air stings your face. The well stands near the edge of the village's short walk, but in this weather, it might as well be a journey across a frozen desert. The rope on the bucket is stiff from frost. You lean over the wooden rim and see your reflection staring back, pale, tired, eyes ringed with shadows. The water beneath is so still it looks like glass. You lower the bucket slowly, hearing the creak of the old wood, and when it hits the water, the sound echoes in the silence like a bell in an empty church. You pull it up, muscles straining. The bucket feels heavier than usual, but you manage to carry it back without spilling much. Inside your hut, the water turns cloudy from the cold air. You'll use it for cooking, for washing, maybe even for melting snow later when this runs out. Resourcefulness isn't optional here. It's survival's only language. Your stomach crumbles. The bread you baked 2 days ago has gone hard as stone, but you break off a piece anyway. You dip it into a thin soup made of barley and turnips. It tastes like smoke and earth. You chew slowly, more to pass time than to satisfy hunger. In the distance, you hear a faint melody, a woman singing to her child. The tune drifts through the wind, soft and mournful. You find yourself humming along, though you don't know the words. It's strange how sound travels. In winter it feels closer, sharper, more human somehow. The walls between huts may be thick, but the loneliness between hearts is paper thin. Later, you decide to visit the communal of and near the village square. Smoke rises faintly from its stone chimney, and a few villagers are already there, mostly women, gossiping quietly while waiting for their loaves. You nod in greeting and take your place near the fire. The warmth is a relief, a temporary truce with the cold. One of them, a woman named Elspeth, leans toward you. Her eyes dart around before she whispers, "The reeve says the Lord might raise taxes again. Says the harvest was poor. You nearly laugh. Poor doesn't begin to describe it. The fields were half frozen by early October. Most of the grain went straight to the manor anyway. A man nearby mutters something about hiding a sack of barley in the woods, and everyone glances at him like he's just confessed to treason. In a way he has. The penalty for hoarding grain is severe whipping. At best, but people are desperate. Hunger makes saints into thieves, and thieves into legends. When it's your turn, you slide your dough into the glowing mouth of the oven. The heat licks your hands, almost painfully warm after the frost outside. The smell of baking bread fills the air, sweet and heavy. For a few minutes, the world feels alive again. As you wait, an old man begins telling a story, something about wolves seen near the forest's edge. His voice drops to a whisper when he says, "They walk closer every night." The others nod uneasily. You've heard the howls too. Faint but unmistakable. Scholars, centuries from now, will debate whether medieval wolves were truly more aggressive during harsh winters, or if the stories grew in the telling. But you don't care what scholars think. You've seen the tracks yourself. When your bread is ready, you thank the baker and wrap it carefully in cloth. The loaf is warm against your chest as you walk home. Snow begins falling again, fine as dust, catching the faint orange glow of torchlight. You look up at the sky, a dull gray canvas with no stars, no moon, just the heavy quiet of winter pressing down. And as you walk, you notice something. Your footprints vanish behind you almost immediately, swallowed by the falling snow, as if you were never here at all. By the time you return home, your breath fogs so thick it looks like smoke rising from your lips. The door creaks as you push it open, the hinges stiff from cold. Inside, your small hut feels darker than usual. Only the dim glow from the hearth flickers faintly against the walls. You set the bread down near the fire and rub your hands together, trying to coax warmth back into your fingers. The place smells faintly of smoke, wool, and something metallic, maybe from the old cooking pot you've used too long. You sit down, listening to the fire crackle. Every few minutes it hisses softly, like it's whispering something in a language you almost understand. You glance at your meager possessions: a wooden cup, a broken comb, a small icon of a saint carved from bone. The saint's face is worn smooth from years of touch, its features barely visible. You trace the outline with your thumb, the motion automatic, a comfort against the cold and uncertainty. A sudden gust of wind rattles the shutters. You look toward the window, or what passes for one, and see nothing but a blur of white. Snow again. Always snow. It covers the world so completely that even the sound seems frozen. The only proof of life out there are the faint footprints of a dog that passes now and then, probably searching for scraps. You move closer to the fire and pull the bread apart. Steam rises from the loaf's hearts, soft and fragrant, a luxury compared to the stale crusts of yesterday. You eat slowly, every bite a reminder that small comforts still exist. But peace never lasts long in a medieval winter. The door creaks again, this time from a knock. 3 quick taps. You freeze. No one visits at night unless it's urgent. You open it to find a young boy, no more than 12, shivering under a thin cloak. His lips are blue, his face pale as wax. "It's my mother," he says, voice trembling. She's not waking up. You grab your cloak without thinking and follow him through the storm. Snow whips your face, blinding you. But the boy runs ahead, sure-footed, like he's done this before. The village looks ghostly now. Outlines of huts half buried in snow drifts. The only light comes from the small torch the boy carries. It flickers wildly, as if the wind wants to swallow it whole. When you reach his hut, the air inside is heavy, still. A woman lies on a straw bed, eyes closed, skin ashen. You can see her breath, faint and shallow. The hearth is cold. You kneel beside her, your fingers brushing her forehead, ice cold. She must have run out of firewood. You glance at the boy, whose eyes are wide and wet. "Fetch the priest," you whisper, though you already know he won't make it in time. The church is too far, the night too cruel. You pull a blanket over the woman's body, tuck it around her shoulders, and stoke the fire with what little wood remains. As the flames rise, the boy's tears glisten in the orange light. You tell him to sit close to the warmth, to eat some bread. You break your loaf in half and hand it to him. He hesitates, then nods, clutching it tightly. For a while, you both sit in silence. Outside, the wind moans through the cracks in the walls. The fire pops a small defiance against the darkness. You know she won't last till morning. And for the first time tonight, you feel the true weight of winter, not just the cold on your skin, but the quiet grief it brings. When you finally step outside again, snow has stopped falling. The village lies still, blanketed in white, like the world itself has paused to breathe. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls low, mournful and too close for comfort. You pull your cloak tighter and start walking home, the torch in your hand flickering weakly. Each gust of wind feels colder than the last. And though you've survived the night, you can't shake the thought maybe survival here isn't really living. It's just waiting for the next sunrise. By morning, your bones ache like they've been carved from frost. You wake to the dull gray light leaking through the cracks in your shutter. The air so cold it stings your lungs with every breath. The fire in your hearth has long since died out, nothing left but a pile of black and ashen, a faint curl of smoke that smells like old wooden despair. You wrap yourself in your rough wool cloak and step outside. The world is silent, painfully so. No birds, no footsteps, just the heavy stillness that follows a night of relentless snow. Roofs sag under its weight, chimneys puff out thin ribbons of smoke, and every sound feels muffled, swallowed by the weight. Down the narrow lane, you see the boy from last night standing by the church door. His small form is motionless, like a statue carved from grief. You know without asking his mother didn't make it. The church bell tolls once, its deep sound rolling over the frozen fields like a sigh. Death in winter isn't rare here. It's as common as frostbite or hunger. People vanish quietly, wrapped in their own blankets, and the living just move a little slower the next day, carrying on because they must. You walk toward the boy, each step crunching on the snow. When you reach him, you rest a hand on his shoulder. He doesn't look up. Inside the church, it's barely warmer. The air smells of wax and stone, and the flickering candles throw long, soft shadows across the altar. The priest stands near the front, his face pale in the candlelight. He murmurs a prayer, words you've heard so many times they no longer sound sacred, just routine. Scholars still argue, you think absently, whether faith truly kept medieval people strong or merely numb. You glance around. Villagers stand in silence, hoods drawn low. Their faces look hollow, eyes fixed on nothing. You recognize most of them: the cooper, the shepherd's wife, the old woman who sells herbs. Each of them wears the same expression, quiet hindrance. When the service ends, the priest sprinkles holy water and everyone leaves without a word. Outside, the cold hits harder than before. You walk toward the fields, though you know there's little to be done there today. The earth is frozen solid, a graveyard for seeds that won't see the sun for months. You spot a raven perched on the fence post, black feathers gleaming against the snow. It tilts its head at you, unbothered, as if to say it's the only creature thriving this season. You can't help but smirk at any moment of sarcasm in a world that's forgotten how to laugh. By midday, your stomach growls. You haven't eaten since last night. You return home, tear a small piece of salted pork from the hanging rack, and chew slowly, savoring the taste of something that's not bread. The salt burns your cracked lips, but somehow, it feels good, real. You sit near the hearth again, staring at the empty fireplace. You'll need more wood soon, but the forest is far and dangerous in deep snow. Still, you know you'll have to go. Survival doesn't wait. Outside, you hear faint laughter, children, somehow still finding joy sliding down a frozen hill on warm planks. Their cheeks are red, their clothes tattered, but the sound of their laughter cuts through the stillness like a song. For a brief second, it feels like warmth. You lean back and close your eyes. The image of the boy and his mother lingers behind your eyelids. You wonder how long you could last here if you weren't used to it, a visitor from another time. Perhaps you'd probably last one night, maybe two, before the cold or hunger got you. You open your eyes again, the firewood decision already made in your mind. You grab your axe, sling it over your shoulder, and step outside. The snow crunches beneath your boots as you head for the tree-lined dark stretch of forest waiting at the edge of the world. You take one last look back at the village, small, quiet, and alive, at least for now. Then you disappear into the trees, where winter waits with open arms. As the moonlight poured through the narrow windows of the abbey, the monks moved quietly through the cloisters. Every step echoed in the hollow halls, yet no one spoke. Silence was not just a rule here. It was a way of life. The rule of Saint Benedict demanded its speech was a luxury, not a necessity. Only in prayer or confession could words be uttered, and even then only sparingly. Imagine spending decades in such silence. No gossip, no laughter, no idle conversation, just the hum of wine against the stone walls and the creak of wooden doors. But to the monks silence was sacred. It kept the mind pure, the heart humble, and the soul closer to God. They believed that through silence, one could hear divine whispers, the quiet guidance of faith. Yet not every monk found peace in it. Young novices, newly arrived from noisy villages, often struggled the most. Many broke the rule, a whispered joke here, a quick exchange of words there. The punishment, fasting, isolation, and sometimes hours of kneeling in the cold chapel floor until repentance replaced defiance. But silence wasn't always empty. It was filled with meaning. When the bell rang for prayer, the monks would line up in perfect stillness. Their eyes met, and in that gaze, they spoke more than words ever could: empathy, understanding, brotherhood. Silence had become their unspoken language. Still, deep within some hearts, there was conflict. Was this really the path to enlightenment, or simply a cage wrapped in holiness? Late at night, some monks confessed silently to the darkness. They missed the sound of laughter, the music of human connection. But they stayed, because even in silence, the walls of the abbey seemed to breathe, as if the centuries of devotion had given them a soul of their own. And so night after night, they continued walking, praying, working, bound by the invisible thread of sacred silence. In the dimly lit scriptorium, a soft glow from oil lamps fell across rows of wooden desks. Quills scratched gently against parchment, and the faint scent of ink and beeswax filled the air. This was where the monks spoke not through words, but through art. Their silence gave birth to colors, symbols, and stories that would outlive them all. Every manuscript they worked on was a sacred act of devotion. Before beginning, a monk would bow his head in prayer, asking for steady hands and pure thoughts. Then, with slow, deliberate strokes, he would begin to copy ancient texts, lines of Latin, holy scriptures, or moral tales meant to teach virtue. But here's the secret most never knew between those holy words. Many monks added their own hidden touches. A tiny drawing in the corner, a sly smile, a human face, a mythical beast. Sometimes they even painted playful images, rabbits chasing hunters, or monks sneaking wine. It was their rebellion, small yet powerful. Through these silent jokes, they reminded themselves that holiness didn't erase humanity. Color was their language. Gold leaf shimmered like divine light. Deep blues and crims and reds spoke of passion and sacrifice. Some believed that by painting with devotion, they could transcend mortal sin and bring glory to God. But others, especially the younger monks, felt something else stirring as they worked, a yearning not just for divine perfection, but for beauty, for emotion, for expression. The abbot never spoke of such desires, but everyone knew they existed. They were buried in the margins of the manuscript's coded symbols of emotion, secret prayers of lonely hearts. The monks had turned their vow of silence into a new form of communication in imagination. Sometimes a brother would pause his work, his gaze softening as the candle flickered. The silence around him felt heavy, but also alive, as if the walls were whispering stories of all who came before. His hand trembled as he drew a figure, perhaps a memory of someone from his past, a face he could never name aloud. By morning, those traces of human feeling would dry into art frozen forever between pages of scripture. And when future generations opened those books, they wouldn't just find holy words, they'd find the souls of the men who wrote them. The first sound that touches your ears each morning isn't a bird or a breeze, it's the bell. A cold, hollow ring echoing through the stone corridors. It doesn't just wake you, it commands you. Before sunrise, before thought, you rise. The chill bites at your fingers as you pull your coarse robe tighter around you and shuffle silently to the chapel. No one speaks, the rules forbid it. Inside, the air is thick with incense and half-whispered prayers. The flicker of candlelight dances on the faces of the brothers beside you. You don't know what most of them dream of, if they even allow themselves to dream anymore. Their eyes stare forward, focused on the altar, the promise of salvation glowing faintly behind veils of fatigue. The prayers begin. Latin murmurs roll like waves, rhythmic, hypnotic, endless. You catch yourself almost swaying to them. It's strange, the repetition dulls your mind, yet somehow it's soothing. Maybe that's what they meant when they said prayer cleanses the soul by grinding down every sharp edge of your individuality until you're smooth, obedient, silent. After prayer comes labor. The bell again. Always the bell. You head to your assigned duty, perhaps the fields, perhaps the kitchen, or maybe back to the scriptorium. Every motion is measured, every act a ritual. Work becomes prayer. Silence becomes language. Even your hunger feels holy. By midday, you eat in silence to a piece of bread, a bowl of broth, nothing more. The reader stands at the end of the table, reciting scripture while everyone else chews quietly. You can't even look up for long, disciplined in man's eyes on the plate. One careless glance and you could be accused of vanity or distraction. And then the bell again. You begin to hate it, that sound of polished brass ruling every moment of your existence. But deep down, you depend on it. Without it, you wouldn't know when to breathe. That's the paradox of monastery life: freedom within confinement, peace through repetition. Evening falls slowly. Shadows stretch across the stone courtyard as you gather again for vespers. Your voice, soft and warm, joins the others in chanting psalms. The notes rise up to the rafters, blending into something ancient and haunting. For a brief moment, you feel part of something vast, like time itself has folded around you. But as night descends and you return to your narrow bed, you can't help wondering, how many winters could you really survive like this? With no laughter, no family, no touch, only rules and silence and the ringing of that cursed, sacred bell. The church bell tolls slow, heavy, and deliberate as you step into the chill morning air. It's not a call for prayer this time. It's a call for penance. Someone has been caught stealing bread from the abbey's kitchen. The villagers gather near the wooden post in the square, breath puffing white in the frost, murmurs thick with both pity and judgment. You clutch your cloak tighter, half from the cold and half from the uneasy reminder that sin here is never private, it's a public affair. You watch as the accused, a young man with hollow cheeks and trembling hands, is tied to the post. His crime, hunger. The priest reads aloud a sermon about the dangers of temptation, about how sin festers in the heart like rot in the grain store. The villagers nod solemnly, though you can feel it. Everyone here has stolen something at some point. A few turnips, an extra sip of ale, a moment's rest. You wonder quietly if morality is different when survival is on the line. Then comes the punishment, not execution, but humiliation. He's forced to wear a wooden shaming collar, painted with crude horns, and walk barefoot around the village square. The crowd throws soft clods of mud, not out of cruelty, but participation. Justice, they call it. You notice the priest's face stern, unblinking. Behind that expression, perhaps a quiet relief that it's someone else this time. A scholar centuries later might argue whether medieval punishment was truly about just a sore control, a way to keep fear sharper than hunger. But in this moment, standing among your neighbors, you feel something else, the cold hand of guilt. Not for a sin you've done, but for the ease with which you've watched it unfold. As the bell tolls again, the air feels heavier, pressing down on your shoulders. You shuffle back toward your hut, the sound of the young man's bare feet slapping against frozen mud echoing behind you. Later that night, when the wind howls and the rafters creak, you'll think of him walking under the same moonlight, frost clinging to his lashes. And deep down, a whisper stirs, the kind that you can't pray away easily, reminding you that maybe you'd do the same if you were starving. Because here, sin and survival often wear the same face. The next dawn breaks pale and tired, like the village itself. The snow hasn't stopped, only softened into a quiet drizzle of flakes, blanketing the filth beneath it. You trudge toward the fields, though fields feels generous this time of year. What remains is a crust of frozen earth, riddled with stalks as brittle as straw. The villagers move like ghosts through the haze, each bundled in rags, carrying tools dull from overuse and undercare. You stop beside a woman pulling at the frozen ground with a wooden spade. Her fingers are raw, her breath misting in sharp bursts. She nods at you, a silent greeting. There's no energy for talk. The only sounds are the scrape of wood, the crunch of snow, and the low groan of the wind moving through the trees. Somewhere, a crow calls, that black herald of bad luck. The work is pointless, and yet everyone keeps digging, because doing something feels safer than doing nothing. You remember hearing the Lord's steward last week say, "Idleness invites the devil." So you dig too, just to stay in God's favor, or at least out of his wrath. Your hands burn, then go numb, then stop feeling altogether. At midday, someone pulls out a crust of barley bread. You share it between 3 people, soaking it in melted snow so it's easier to chew. The taste is plain, but it feels divine. Hunger here is not an event, it's a slow, steady rhythm, like the ticking of an invisible clock. And everyone knows what happens when it stops ticking. A stray thought drifts through your head. Scholars still argue whether the medieval peasant really believed in divine reward, or if that belief was just the only way to stay sane. You glance at the horizon, where the church spire pierces the gray sky like a promise. Maybe heaven is just a story told to keep people moving through winters like this. Maybe it's enough. By dusk, your back aches, your feet are wet, and your breath feels like smoke in your chest. You head home as the sky bruises into purple. The village dogs bark faintly somewhere, hungry too, their ribs visible beneath matted fur. You pass the small hut where the punished thief used to live. It's dark now, door hanging open, snow drifting in. You pull your hood tighter and walk faster. The wind picks up, stinging your face with sleet. For a moment, you think you see something, a figure at the edge of the field, still and watching. Maybe it's just a post. Maybe not, but you don't stop to check. In a medieval village, it's best not to look too long into the dark. You never know what might look back. You reach your hut, breath ragged, clothes stiff with cold. Inside, the air smells of smoke and damp straw. The fire in the hearth has burned down to embers, glowing faintly like dying stars. You kneel to feed it a few twigs, watching the small flames flicker back to life. The sound is soft, a faint crackle, almost like sighing. You sit close, hands outstretched, letting the warmth creep back into your bones. Your companion, the old man who sleeps by the far wall, mutters in his sleep. You can't tell if it's prayer or fever. His face glistens with sweat despite the cold. A strip of cloth covers his arm, still red from a festering wound. He was cut stacking wood last week. You told him to wash it in boiled water. He said God would heal it. Now it smells faintly sweet, the kind of sweet that means trouble. Outside, the night rises again. Through the cracks in the door, a pale glow leaks in moonlight reflecting off snow. You can hear it too, the stillness of the village. Not the silence of peace, but of exhaustion. Everyone's conserving words, conserving movement. You think of how sound carries far in winter. A single cough echoes down the lane like a church bell. You look around your home, a wooden bowl, a short stool, the patchwork blanket your mother left behind. Life in a medieval village doesn't offer much, but it teaches you to see value in little things. That stool, a miracle of carpentry. That bowl, a treasure when food is rare. And the blanket, your whole world when frost bites your skin. You tear a strip of bread and chew slowly. Hard as stone, but it fills your stomach enough to quiet the gnawing. In the dim light, you study the frost crystals forming on the wall, tiny stars. Perfect and cold. You think about how monks in faraway abbeys spend winters too, writing and praying in silence. You've heard they drink ale and sleep in stone chambers. You imagine them warm, scribbling on parchment while you freeze on straw. Scholars still argue, you recall, whether peasants envied monks or pitied them. You suppose it depends on the monk or the peasant. The fire begins to dim again. You lie down beside it, wrapping the blanket tight. The old man mutters again, this time louder. You whisper something, not quite a prayer, not quite a thought, just sound, to keep the dark from settling too deep. As your eyes grow heavy, you listen not for voices, but for absence. No wind, no steps, no cries from the animals. The kind of silence that feels like the world is holding its breath. You close your eyes, promising yourself you'll wake before dawn. Though you know time means little here. Winter doesn't count days. It just endures until someone doesn't. Dawn comes reluctantly, pale, sluggish and gray. You wake to the creak of wood, the slow drip of thawing frost from the thatch above. For a moment, you don't know if it's still night or not. The light is so faint it feels like a trick, as if the world hasn't decided yet whether it wants to wake up. You sit up, rubbing your neck. The old man's breathing has gone shallow. You check his forehead, colder now. Strangely calm. You don't say anything. There's nothing to say. In winter, you learn to let silence do the speaking. You pull on your boots stiff with frozen mud and step outside. The air is sharp enough to bite. Your breath clouds instantly, swirling around your face. The ground crunches under your feet, each step echoing through the narrow lane. From a distance you hear a rooster crow, thin and tired. It sounds as though even he's set in guessing the idea of being awake. As you pass by the neighboring huts, thin trails of smoke rise from a few chimneys. Most, though, remain cold. You know what that means. People saving firewood or gone. You look toward the village square. It's little more than a patch of froze and earth with a well in the center. A few villagers gather around it, bundled in cloaks, trading glances instead of greetings. You nod toward them. They nod back, their faces unreadable. The baker's wife, the one who used to hum while kneading dough, clutches her shawl tighter. Her husband didn't make it through last week's fever. She hasn't spoken since. You take the bucket and lower it into the well. The rope squeaks a slow, tired sound. When the bucket splashes, it feels louder than it should. The water's dark, heavy, and so cold it burns your hands when you pull it up. You drink just enough to wet your throat, then pour the rest into a wooden jug. Every drop is precious now the stream's been frozen for days. A boy passes by barefoot, carrying firewood half his size. His breath puffs in small clouds. You want to tell him to wear shoes, but you don't. You know he doesn't have any. As you return to your hut, you notice something glinting in the snow, a frozen feather. Black and silver, a raven's. You smile faintly. Ravens thrive when others starve. They're survivors. In a way, you respect that. Scholars still argue whether medieval peasants feared winter. You recall, or just quietly accepted it like an old enemy they knew by name. You think it's both. Fear and acceptance to sides of the same frostbitten coin. Back inside, the old man still. The fire's gone out. You stand there for a while, staring at the thin wisp of smoke curling upward, dissolving into the cold air. Then quietly, you cover his face with the blanket. No words, no prayers, just a sigh. You sit down, hands folded, and let the silence stretch. Outside, the village moves slowly, as if afraid that making too much noise might wake something best left sleeping. You step out again, this time with purpose. The day has barely begun, but the chores won't wait for grief to settle. Winter doesn't pause out of kindness, it only pauses when it's won. The fields beyond the village are blanketed in frost. A pale ocean of silence. The earth looks dead. But you know it isn't. Beneath that cold crust, seeds still lie in wait, stubborn and patient. You admire that. You wish you could learn that kind of patience, the kind that outlasts death. You trudge along the familiar path, boots cracking through the thin shell of ice on puddles. The wind cuts across your face, sneaking into every fold of your cloak. From a distance, you seek Rose picking at something dark in the snow, probably a frozen hare. Or worse, you don't look too long. Out here, everything eats everything. You reach the fence line that marks your small patch of land. It looks miserable, a few broken stakes. A scarecrow slumped like it's given up on life. You walk over and straighten its wooden spine, adjusting the torn hood that once belonged to your brother. The wind blows through its hollow body, making it whistle faintly. You mutter, "Still scaring nothing, are you?" and almost laugh. A farmer nearby waves at you, Tomas, the one who's always optimistic to a fault. His nose is red, his beard frosted white, but his grin is still intact. "You heard," he says, trudging closer. "Lord's men are coming tomorrow. Tax collection." You groan softly. You'd almost forgotten. Or maybe you'd hoped too. They say, Tomas continues, he might take grain instead of coin this year. You raise an eyebrow. What grain? He shrugs, laughs hollowly, and points to his empty field. Guess we'll find out. There's no anger in his voice, just the dry humor of a man who's learned that shouting at the wind doesn't make its talk. You exchange a few words about the livestock. 2 cows died in the night. Someone's goat went missing. Ordinary tragedies. As he leaves, you watch his figure shrink against the horizon, disappearing into the mist. You wonder how he still finds something to smile about. Maybe madness and hope are cousins. You sit down on a stump, staring at the faint sun behind the clouds. It's weak, like a candle fighting to stale it. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the wind hum in your ears. Scholars still argue whether medieval villagers truly believed winter was divine punishment. You recall, or just another test to prove who deserves spring. You're not sure what you believe. Maybe it's both. Maybe punishment and test are the same thing, a reminder that you're still here. You stand up, stretch, and start walking back toward the village. Smoke rises from one of the chimneys. Someone started baking bread. The smell hits you like a memory, warm and fleeting. You smile faintly. For a second, you feel alive again. By the time you return to the village, the faint warmth of bread has faded from the air, replaced by something heavier fear. It moves like smoke between the thatched cottages. People whisper near doors, glance toward the road that leads to the manor. You know what that means. The Lord's men have been spotted. You keep walking, trying not to make eye contact. But curiosity wins. You glance toward the far end of the lane, where 3 riders emerge from the mist. Their horses snort, coats glistening, breath steaming. The men wear chainmail under thick cloaks, with leather belts heavy with scrolls and seals. Tax collectors, the most feared guests in winter. One of them tall, narrow face, eyes like sharp stones, dismounts slowly. He scans the villagers like a hawk searching for prey. You can feel everyone stiffen. He calls out in a dry, official tone. By order of his lordship, each household will present their dues by dusk. Coin, grain, or otherwise. That otherwise always hides 1,000 horrors. You step back into the shadows between cottages, watching as your neighbors line up, clutching sacks of barley, baskets of eggs, even carved trinkets, anything that might satisfy the collectors. Children peek from behind doorways wide-eyed. When your turn comes, you carry your small offering, a jar of honey and a loaf of bread. It's pitiful, but it's all you can spare. The man inspects it like a judge examining evidence. This, he says, will hardly count toward your owed portion. You bow your head slightly, trying to stay calm. It's all we have, sir. The frost took most of the rest. He raises an eyebrow. Then perhaps you should have prayed harder. The cruelty in his voice isn't even angry, it's casual. The kind born from habit. He writes something on his scroll, mutters a fine under his breath, and moves on. You let out a slow breath, realizing your hands are shaking. You step aside, watching as others meet the same fate, a farmer pleading for mercy, an old woman begging to keep her last hen. One man argues too loudly, and the soldiers drag him away. His wife's scream echoes through the narrow lane. Scholars still argue whether peasants ever truly trusted their lords. You think, or whether fear just became a kind of faith. The sun begins to sink. The collectors finally mount their horses again, satisfied with their plunder. They leave as slowly as they came, hoofs clattering like a grim drumbeat. The village exhales. You walk to the well, scoop up a handful of water, and wash your face. The cold bites hard. You stare at your reflection pale, hollow-eyed and tired. You whisper to yourself, "One more winter, that's all." Behind you, someone begins humming a hymn, low and shaky, but still beautiful. You turn. It's the widow from the next house, holding her son close as she sings. You don't know the words, but you hum along. For once, the cold doesn't win entirely. The next morning arrives like an apology, faint light dripping through the clouds. Not warm, but less cruel than before. You stretch your arms and hear the timbers above you creak in protest. For a brief moment, you almost forget the taxes, the hunger, the endless cycle of dread that fills the village. Outside, the snow crunches softly beneath your boots. Smoke curls from the chimneys, weaving through the pale sky like lazy ribbons. A few villagers are already up, scraping frost off buckets, checking traps, shaking the last bits of life from frozen herbs. Life continues because it has to. You walk toward the edge of the fields, past the wooden cross that marks the village boundary. Beyond it lies the forest, silent, wide, and menacing. But to you, it's also a kind of freedom. You venture there sometimes, not for wood or game, but just to breathe air that doesn't belong to anyone. Today you go a little farther. Your path takes you through narrow trails where frost clings to every leaf and twig. A fox darts across your view, its orange fur-like flare against the snow. You watch it vanish into the underbrush, and for a second you envy it, free from dues, free from lords, free from prayers that never seem to reach anyone. You reach a small frozen stream and kneel beside it. Beneath the thin ice, you can see dark water still moving. You break a piece of ice and watch it slide downstream. You wonder how many winters did this stream survive? How many winters will you? Behind you, footsteps. You turn, startled but relax when you see it's only Ulrich the miller's son. His breath clouds the air between you. Looking for trouble, he says with a grin that's half genuine, half tired. Looking for quiet, you reply. He sits beside you, rubbing his hands. Quiet's dangerous, gives you too much time to think. You smirk, and what's wrong with thinking? He shrugs. Nothing, unless you think about leaving. You both fall silent. That word leaving is one nobody dares say aloud near the manor. Running away is a sin, a crime, and a dream all at once. Some try it, most never return. After a while, Ulrich stands. Come to the mill later. He says, Father's found a way to grind the grain without freezing the stones. Might actually get us bread again. You nod and he disappears down the path. You stay, listening to the forest breathe creaks. Whispers, distant caws. Then a sudden sound breaks at the deep toll of the church bell. It rings 3 times, not for prayer, for warning. You start running, heart pounding. The bell keeps tolling, echoing through the woods. By the time you reach the village, people are already gathering near the square. Faces pale and eyes wide. Smoke rises again, but not from the chimneys this time. Somewhere near the edge of the manor, something is burning. By the time you reach the main road, the air reeks of ashened, wet timber. The snow, once white, is streaked with soot. Villagers crowd around the flames, clutching their cloaks close, whispering prayers, though none seem to know what to pray for. It's the tax collector's cart, what's left of it. The wood crackles and collapses inward, blackened metal wheels hissing in the melting snow. His horse is gone, the man himself gone too. Father Terence stands closest to the fire, his robe spattered with ash, his hands trembling as he holds up a wooden cross. This, he declares, his voice cracking, is the work of the devil, of temptation and rebellion. Someone has angered the Lord. The crowd murmurs, uneasy. Some glance at you not because they suspect you, but because you're near the woods often. Because you think. Because you don't hide your doubt as well as others do. Then from the back, a voice breaks through. Maybe it's not the devil. Maybe it's just someone tired of starving. It's Ulrich. The priest turns sharply, his face twisting. Mind your tongue, boy. But the crowd isn't silent anymore. A woman mutters, he's right. How long do we pay while they eat and drink? Another man adds, we can't even bury our dead without a fee. It's the first time you've ever heard anyone speak against the manor, not in whispers. Not in secret, but out loud in daylight. Then a shout guards. 2 riders emerge from the fog near the manor gate. Steel armor, bright against the gray morning. Their horses snort clouds of breath as they stop in front of the villagers. One of the guards dismounts, eyes scanning the crowd. Who did this? He demands. The collector's cart. Who burned it? No one answers. The flames crackle. Someone coughs. The guard steps forward, grabbing a man by the collar. You. Speak. The man stammers, shaking his head. We don't know. Liar. The guard shoves him to the ground. You can feel Ulrich's arm tense beside you. His fists clench. You whisper, don't, but he doesn't listen. He steps forward, voice steady. He's telling the truth. No one here knows. The second guard, still on his horse, stares down. Then you won't mind if we take a few of you for questions. A silence heavier than snow falls over the square. You look around, the fear, the faces, the smoke, and something shifts inside you. The kind of shift that doesn't show on your skin, but burns behind your ribs. Because maybe Ulrich's right. Maybe quiet is dangerous. But not for the reasons he thought. The guards drag 3 men away before anyone can move the baker. a shepherd, and the man who shouted devil just moments ago. Their wives cry out, clutching at their sleeves. But the guards shove them back into the snow. The priest does nothing. He just stands there, his lips moving silently in what might be a prayer or a plea. When the riders leave, the village seems to shrink. The fire burns lower, the crowd scatters. Everyone's eyes dart toward the manor on the hill, dark, tall, watching. You walk home with Ulrich, though neither of you say a word. The snow crunches beneath your boots. Somewhere in the forest, a crow does a harsh, lonely sound. When you reach your cottage, Ulrich stops. They won't stop, he says finally. They'll come again. They'll take more. You open your mouth to argue, but you can't find the words. He's right. They'll call it order, he continues. But it's fear. They're afraid of what happens when we realize we're more than tools. You sigh. And what then? What do we do? Ulrich, burn every cart? Fight armored men with bare hands? He looks at you, eyes glinting with something fierce. Not fight, wake up. Then he's gone, vanishing into the woods as the wind picks up. You stand there for a long time, staring at the faint orange glow of the manor windows through the mist. That night, you can't sleep. You keep hearing the priest's voice, the guard's threats, the crackling of the burning cart. When you finally drift off, you dream strange, vivid dreams. A hooded monk sits at a desk, dipping his quill into reed ink, the parchment glowing faintly in the candlelight. His face is hidden, but when he looks up, his eyes are your own. He writes a single line, slow and deliberate. The silence was never holy. You jolt awake, sweat dripping down your back. The moonlight spills across the floor, cold and sharp. Something's different. The next morning, you find the monastery gates wide open, an almost unthinkable sight. The brothers stand outside whispering, watching a group of riders from the manor dismount and approach. Their leader, a man in deep crimson robes, speaks softly with Father Turven. Rumor spreads fast. They're searching every home for heretical writings. Ulrich's words echo in your mind. You glance toward the forest path, and before you know it, your feet are moving not toward safety, but toward danger, toward him, toward something you don't yet understand but can no longer ignore. The silence is over. The forest feels different today, not peaceful, not haunted, but alive. Every twig snap and bird call seems to carry meaning. The cold air burns your lungs as you hurry through the snow, following faint footprints you're certain belong to Ulrich. You finally find him by the frozen river, crouched beside a half-buried satchel. He looks up when you approach, a small grin tugging at his chapped lips. Took you long enough, he says. You kneel beside him. What is that? He opens the satchel and pulls out several scrolls, wrapped in cloth to protect them from the damp. Copies, he whispers, from the monastery. Sermons, letters, strange texts they don't want anyone reading. Some of these talk about things they pretend never existed: pagan rites, forbidden herbs, ancient cures. You take one, unroll it carefully. The handwriting is delicate, looping, beautiful. You can read most of it Latin. You think but one phrase stands out. Written in the margins: knowledge is not a sin. You look at him, incredulous. You stole these? He shrugs. Borrowed. The way they borrowed everything from us: land, labor, truth. The weight of what he's saying hits you slowly. This isn't about a bad winter anymore. It's about power. Who holds it? Who hides it? Why tell me? You ask. He hesitates. Because I can't do it alone. These ideas need to live even if we don't. You flinch. Don't say that. But he just smiles, sad and knowing. You've seen what happens to those who question things. They vanish, or worse. He ties the scrolls back into the satchel, then hands it to you. If they come for me, take this east to the abbey at St. Walrick's. There are brothers there who still remember what faith was meant to be. You don't answer right away. The river groans under its icy skin, and somewhere far off, a wolf howls. "I'm no hero," you finally mutter. He looks at you, really looks at you, and says softly, "Neither am I. That's what makes it work." The two of you walk back toward the village as dusk bleeds across the sky. The kind of fiery red that makes even the snow look like it's burning. By the time you reach the outskirts, smoke is rising again. But it's not from the manor this time. It's from the cottages. You freeze. Screams echo down the road. Men shouting orders. The guards are back searching, tearing through homes. And for the first time, you realize they're not looking for men. They're looking for words. Flames lit the night sky as the guards storm through the snow-covered streets. Torches blazing like vengeful stars. The air fills with smoke and panicked children crying. Dogs barking, the crash of doors being kicked in. You and Elric duck behind a half-collapsed fence. Your heart pounding so hard it drowns out every other sound. "They're burning books," Elric whispers. His voice trembles, not from fear, from fury. You peer through the slats. It's true. Piles of parchment and scrolls are being thrown into the fire by the cartload. The very thing that once made the monastery a place of learning is now feeding the flames. You spot Father Obiarin at the center of it all, shouting commands, his face glowing orange in the firelight. No heresy survives this night. He bellows, "The devil's lies will not corrupt our village. The hypocrisy burns hotter than the torches." These men who preached peace now look like zealots at war with paper and ink. Ulrich grabs your arm. "We can't stay." "Where?" You whisper. "Every exit's guarded." He doesn't answer immediately. Then, through the rising smoke, he points toward the northern woods, the path leading to the frozen marshes. "Through there. They'll never follow us that far in this weather." You hesitate, glancing back at the inferno. Your neighbors are being dragged from their homes. A mother pleads for mercy as her husband is struck down. You want to help, you really do, but the truth is brutal. You can't save them without dying too. "Go," Ulrich hisses. You clutch the satchel to your chest and run. Snow crunches under your boots as you flee past the edge of the village. Behind you, the fire crackles like applause for the end of the world. Your lungs burn, your fingers ache. But you don't stop until the last light of the flames fades behind the trees. Finally, you collapse beside a fallen log. Ulrich kneels beside you, catching his breath. For a long time, neither of you speak. The silence feels heavier than the smoke you left behind. "They'll hunt us," you finally say. He nods. "Maybe, but they'll never find this." He pats the satchel now wrapped in his cloak. "Hidden from sight. These words will live longer than they ever could." You sit there in the quiet dark, the sound of distant wind moaning through the branches. Somewhere out there, dawn will rise again, maybe not for you, but for someone who will one day read what's in that bag and understand why you risked everything. The first snowflakes begin to fall again, covering the footprints behind you, erasing the past. And for the first time all winter, the cold doesn't feel like death. It feels like truth. And now, as the footsteps fade into the hush of snow and the forest wallows the last traces of warmth, it's time for you to rest too. The story slows down like a fire shrinking into quiet embers. You can almost feel the faint glow of that dying fire, the smell of pine resin, and the weight of soft wool around your shoulders. Imagine it now, the crackle of distant wood, the hush of winter air brushing past an old wooden door. Inside, the world is still. You can almost hear the monks again, their voices a faint hum under the stone arches, steady as the rhythm of your own heartbeat. It's calm now. The wars, the frost, the fear, they're far away. You're left only with the whisper of parchment and the slow warmth of survival. There's something strangely comforting about that, isn't there? The idea that even in the coldest centuries, people still sang, prayed, wrote, and waited for spring. So let your mind wander little maybe through the narrow halls of that old monastery, or across the frozen fields under a pale, forgiving moon. Let the echoes of ink, silence, and candlelight trap around you like a blanket. Take a deep breath. The story is over, but the quiet remains. You've made it through another long winter safely, softly. Good night, traveler. Sleep well beneath the stars of another age.